I was passing by this house in my travels today, and I thought suddenly, what a great subject, what a great scene, this old weatherboard cottage for one of our daily drawing exercises. Now, this was always going to be a bit of a challenge for a 10-minute drawing, but I do get basically the house drawn in the 10 minutes, so you'll see that 10 or 11 minutes real time. And then we'll double time just for a few of the extra lines needed for the weatherboards and the gardens and the trees behind at double time. But I find these sorts of cottages are really good practice drawings because we can simplify them down and not intend to do a finished drawing, but rather we can just use them in the 10 minutes to draw a simplified version to really work on our observation of angles and foreshortening, because they give us a nice, fairly simplified veranda with the veranda poles that foreshortens as it moves away. That gives us various angles, top and bottom, and also gives us various gaps between the veranda posts. You'll notice with this old rose bush, if we just pop back to the drawing for a minute, I decided to draw it in, and I decided to make sure I drew it before I drew the house behind, because then I could leave hopefully that slight gap between my lines and have the sense that this rose bush is significantly closer to us, even though at the moment, the time of year it being here in autumn, it's very bare. I find it's always nice if we can have something in front of a further object to feel closer. That just helps create a more sense of depth in what we're looking at. So I've done that, so now I can position the poles, the veranda posts, wooden beams they are, with a little bit of decorative work on the top. I sort of drew them and then I basically hatched them out of existence, the bits above the poles, but never mind. I didn't know that at this stage. So I'm really working on the angles and the proportions of the spaces between, the gaps between. And then we have a large, pretty much I think a square shape as the veranda returns back along the side of the house. And of course we have another angle at the base. It's actually, and this is perhaps a bit unusual, it's a steeper angle than the upper veranda angle. And that's because this is a street that slopes down reasonably, and so I'm actually closer to the top of the veranda, my eyes, eye level, camera level, than the bottom of the veranda. So therefore, the angle is more shallow at the top, closer to eye level. So if that doesn't make sense, you need to look at my perspective playlist and find the videos on eye level, because it's such an important thing to be aware of when we draw anything that's affected by perspective. Really, unless we're looking straight at an object, so there's no distortion, we really need to have a sense of where eye level is as accurately as we can before we almost consider anything else. So this is where I probably slow down a little bit. It's a different time of the day. It's actually evening here. I don't normally draw these of an evening, but I felt like doing it. But I think, yes, I did, once the pressure of mapping out the veranda angles and proportions and foreshortening was all done, I think I began to relax a little bit too much. At some point I realised it. And now just looking at what we can see of the doors. There's a couple of doors and a window, and I assume a tin power box cover. And then I spend a good bit of time doing this decoration along the side here. Now I didn't do it large enough, but I could have done it a bit larger and a bit smaller, and that would have worked out well. And now I have to create the effect down here with the foreshortening taken into account. So it's basically going to have a bit of a different look from the gap between the furthest to veranda posts to the closest. just with the compression. So I want to allow something of that, and now just reinforcing the line, hoping I don't cover it all up with the line. Okay, so having got that done, I think it was about 7 minutes at this stage from memory. I'm thinking, I better get a move on. So just looking to see these other kind of structural lines of the building. I began to put a few weatherboards in just to get a sense of the angles, and totally forgot that I hadn't put the window in yet. I was thinking that that doorway was the window, the doorway that I'd allowed for. So fortunately, none of it was very serious. I have room to put the power box in, and the window really is a fairly sympathetic direction of lines for the lines I've put there. So it's not creating any distress in attention, I don't think, particularly. I'm using a 0.1 millimeter pen, if you're interested, because I thought drawing it relatively small to give me a better chance of getting it done in time, in the time limit that we had, I thought would be helpful. So just getting these weatherboards out of the way. Probably did a few too many of them, I think. And now there's some lattice work that encloses the far side, or very typical Aussie cottage architecture and materials. Although sadly not many buildings like this are in this good condition in Sydney anymore. So reinforcing the angles, and now I start to experiment with a bit of hatching, because I am aware that that dark hatching under the veranda, or those dark values under the roof of the veranda, are visually a fairly important part of the scene. And so I start playing around with them and make a big visual mess, I think, and end up thinking, well, look, when I'm in the double time section, I'll just do a bit more hatching here just to increase the values more. And so just see the difference between how it looks now and how it looks at the end under the veranda, to see the difference that a little more line work can add, that a little more darkness creates, the effect it creates. And now just navigating the roof line as best I can. And I really draw quite a large amount of this relatively quickly, I think, from this point on. We're still within the 10 minutes. And one of the benefits of having established my earlier horizontal lines at reasonably accurate angles is I can now confidently move up. And as I move up with each line, I know I have to slightly increase the angle, regardless of where the line is or how much of it there is. There are a number of now levels of horizontal lines above this, and with each one I have to just tilt it a little bit more. And there's another rose bush there that I include because it does link in with the other one that I've done. Now I've decided to leave the bath out because I'm not a slave to the photo, and I wanted to have it without that disruption, that visual disruption. In some ways it goes quite nicely with the old cottage because it is an old bath, but it's actually in the neighbour's yard, so it's not a part of this cottage. It certainly didn't come out of the bathroom during a renovation or anything. And so now getting this window done, and probably could have put a little more shading into that, but I get distracted by the roof, and I do that, put that line on my reference, particularly just to show you how I align things with what I've drawn, although I often do it when I'm just drawing myself anyway, so it's not just something I'm doing for your sake. I often do it for mine as well. Now this sort of decorative edging to the the wooden beams on the end, I need to do that very gesturally, just really suggest something of the pattern without getting into drawing it in detail. But I'll get the rest of the roofing done. See, I'm aligning the various points with what I've done before. And again, if our gaps get narrower and narrower correctly as the veranda moves away, then we get accurate alignment points for things above them. And so things such as veranda posts are very convenient. I used them a few times already. Now I put the chimney on top, and I think when the chimney goes on top, then that's pretty much our 10 or even a little bit more minutes. So now we're about to step into double time, I think. So at any minute now, I'm going to go much faster, and here we go, double time. If you really want to see the rest of it at real time, you can use the cog icon to reduce this to half speed, and then you'll see it at real time. And hey, if you're still watching this, if you're enjoying this demo, this series, please hit the like button for me. It really does help me out, and it's not too hard for you to do, so that would be great. Thanks. So a very rough gestural feel for the weatherboards, but now I really have to get to work on creating some context, a little stronger contrast. I want to go dark with these trees behind because they make the house stand out so beautifully, both in my reference and hopefully in my drawing. But I have to be really gestural. I'm over the 10 minutes now, and there's a fair bit of tree stuff to draw, and I've still got the garden down the front to do. So I think overall this took me about 15 minutes to draw in real time. So it is nice and fast and furious, and this is one of my more gestural trees, but I think there's enough meaning in the marks for it to read as a tree quite happily. And sometimes having a simpler style for the further back things, particularly trees, works quite well with a foreground, especially architecture, that's in more detail. It almost like emphasizes the fact that the house is the main subject, just so there's no doubt, and the dark values become framing. So here we go now with this garden, a few of these strappy plants that often end up being tricky to draw without being just a meaningless tangle of lines. It's important to get the shadows around the straps that are coming straight at us and flopping down like an elongated triangle surrounded by darkness on one or two sides. So just darkening the value under that side porch. And now what I do is I go over the hatching I've done, but I go over it at a slight angle, which means my lines of the second hatching cross the lines of the first hatching, and it just creates a darker effect more evenly and more quickly than if I just did more vertical lines over the top. And I think you'll agree that visually it works much better now with the poles sticking out a little bit more and that darkness under the veranda there. G'day, I'm Stephen Travers. I hope you found this interesting, and I hope you hit the like button. And why not have a go drawing it yourself? I'll post this reference on my channel community page, so it won't get easier than that. But look, whatever you draw and however you draw it, in whatever time and for whatever purpose, make sure you have fun. I'll see you next time. Bye.